Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce John Smaby. Not only is he a friend, a teacher, a photographer, and a book writer, an excellent author in my opinion. He's impacted many lives. I met him at Cajon High School when he was the new kid on the block. And then after he became a counselor, he went to Golden Valley Middle School, and then he met Donna Reagan there, and it's because of Donna Reagan that I've been able to reconnect with John. And I hope you enjoy him as much as we've enjoyed him all these years.
Thank you very much. I have been really looking forward to coming here this evening, and I've been excited about sharing and asking or answering any questions that you might ask about the book. The first thing I want to do is pass around a photograph. So I did not take the photograph, and I'm going to tell you a story about the photograph after everyone has seen it. While you are just take a look at it, and then while you are doing that, I also want to introduce you to another book. I have put out 2 books. You've already read one of them. This is the first one, though, that came before Stories, and I'm going to make this a gift to your library here. I had no idea we're meeting in a library, so this is a sort of perfect setting to do this. And so I don't know what your policies are about checking out books here, but you will have this. And this actually led into my writing Stories from the Classroom. And the way that worked is I didn't write this book. I just put it together. I just produced it. I created it. You're going to love this. Andy.
Been there.
This is a book of song lyrics that I did not write. And I had to get permission from the musicians and artists that wrote the song lyrics or their record companies if they didn't own their own material. And that was part of a 10-month process back in 2016 to create this book. The other half of the book is mine, is photography. And so each page has a lyric from a song, and these are all Christian songs. So they are songs from artists that I actually used to play on the radio, and that is in one of the early chapters about my time on the radio. And a lot of people assume when they saw this book come out that I did this book to promote my own photography. That's not the inspiration for this book. It was this other page, the song lyrics. And so I'm going to, like I said, I'll leave this for your library, and hopefully you'll have some time to take a look at it.
Oh, thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I'm very, very proud of how this book came out, and because I can say that because it's really not my book. It was written by other people whose song lyrics have meant so much to me and other people. You won't know probably the bands because these are Christian rock artists, and when I stripped away the music and just left their lyrics alone without the music, I realized also something, that people that would never have even come across these lyrics would now probably appreciate them, because some of the music is pretty outlandish. So let me just read the last lyric of the book. And by the way, the book has a beginning, a middle, and an end. When I went through this 10-month process to come up with this book, my goal was to make a story. And it's sort of abstract, a lot of the way it works. But this is the last photograph, and this is from Zion National Park. And it's just 4 lines of the song. It's not the whole song. So it reads like this. Our hope is above and beyond the ephemeral. Our hope is above and beyond the trees. True meaning lies in ultimacy. Our souls are restless till we're found in thee. So that's sort of the closure of the story. It's the beginning is sort of like someone looking at life going, I don't get this. I don't understand what's going on. And in the middle, there's sort of like a turn. They see a glimpse of, okay, maybe this makes sense, and the end is resolution. So it's called Fusion Art. Fusing art of the visual with the written. And who should I give this to?
Oh, you pass it around.
Oh, okay, well that would work too. Sure.
Did you sign it?
You know what, I have not. I will do that. And so maybe I'll need at the end of the meeting I'll ask for who do I sign it to, or how do I do it. So great idea. That photograph has almost made the rounds, and so I'm going to start speaking about the photograph, because what I'd like to do is start with chapter 62. This is a chapter that did not make the book. There were only 61 chapters in the book. So there were actually a few that got X'd out by my editor, Mrs. Cruz, Lolita Cruz. God bless her for telling me that no, that does not belong here. Why would you even think that? So yeah. So this is that photograph is of the second year I taught at Calvary Chapel Christian School in Redlands, and that street that those students are on is San Bernardino Avenue. It used to be Orange Groves, as you all know, around that area. Now they're all big warehouses. And what happened that day was their senior prank. This is the senior class, and that is my desk from my classroom. And somehow, and I'll tell you how, they were able to steal my desk. I was teaching a 7th grade class one morning, and the senior class president, John Alvino, great guy, he was the spearhead of this senior class prank. They decided that they would lure me into the front office with some emergency that I had to be a part of, take care of. And I'll watch your class, Mr. Smaby. It's, just that you're needed. Go talk to Vicki. It's really important. So at a public school, I would never have just left my students. But this is like we're families. Like I trusted him. So I leave John, a senior, with my 7th graders, go to the office. Vicki's like, huh. She was in on it too. I'm not sure what he was referring to. I think I might, but it's been taken care of. She stalled for a little bit. Let me call Mr. Hickok, the principal. No, I think we're good. So I go, okay, that's weird. So I'm walking back to my classroom. He has since left with the desk. He had like 4 or 5 other, students come in and remove it and put it on San Bernardino Avenue. And so I walk in, and all the 7th graders are trying not to laugh. And I walk over to where my desk should be. I'm like, I stop. Okay, my desk isn't there. And they started laughing. So does anyone have any idea what happened to me? It's like, we're not sure. And after a few minutes of this going back and forth, I walk outside and it's not in view. And eventually John walks in and says, hey, Mr. Smaby, why don't you follow me? And so they were so proud. They were so proud of that little prank that they made. And I laughed because they brought it back in. Nothing was removed or stolen or anything like that. So that was chapter 62.
I would say they did it because they loved you.
Well, okay, I'll take that. Yeah.
I read that book so that was you were a rookie at that time. You were
yes.
only at the Christian school for a couple of years.
Year and a half, yes.
Oh, not even 2 years.
Right. I started mid-year, the year before this happened, and that was a blur. And that's another chapter that was not in the book, and it could very easily have been, and it would have been called 5 Preps. Raise your hand if you have been in education. If you in any okay, about half the room. So when I say 5 Preps, you sort of know what I'm getting at. So this is such a small school. When I was hired as the English teacher, that meant there was one English teacher, and I had 5 periods, and they were all 5 different grades.
Wow.
My very first teaching assignment. And so when I found this out, and I started asking people, so how am I supposed to manage preparation for these, when each one has a different novel and vocab words, and say no. Just give them all the same vocab words. 7th grade through 12th grade. And that was good advice, and I'll tell you why. Even doing that, I was still exhausted at the end of every day. If I had tried to do 5 different lists of words and 5 different everythings, I would have killed myself. I would have tried to please, the principal, but he was they just needed a new teacher because the other one was the one that started crying in front of the students because they would push his button. So you may remember reading about that. Yeah. So they were sort of desperate, and I wasn't desperate, but I just said, let's try this. And so I thought that would prepare me for Cajon High School, for a public high school, 9th grade. I had one prep, only one prep. I was like, yes, I just have 9th grade. Well, okay. So another thing that happened with the book, the Fusion Art book, so people started saying things like, they'd see me around and say, oh, I heard you wrote a book. I said, well, I didn't really write it. I put one together. I created it. It was not my writing. And that sort of got to me because I was an English major, I taught English, why can't I write a book? What's the problem here, you know? But I couldn't honestly answer, yes, I wrote a book. No, that's not my writing, those are other people's lyrics. So one day, I was reading another book, and I think I referenced it somewhere in the introduction maybe. It was called All Day, and it was written by this young woman who had a teaching assignment at Rikers Island in New York. And these were incarcerated youth. And the age of consent was 16, so these were 16, 17, 18-year-old youth. They weren't necessarily criminals, they were waiting for their trial. They had been apprehended for something, they weren't necessarily guilty, but they wanted to make their day go a little faster, and so they volunteered to go to this English class. And this teacher wrote about her experience inside that classroom, and it was half dialogue. It was just fascinating. And I didn't say this in the book because I don't want to come off as being prideful, but at the end of the book, I closed it. I go, I could do better than this. I was like, why don't you just give it a shot? Why don't you write a chapter? And so I did, and I sent it to Lolita, who was the one that hired me to be a counselor at Golden Valley when I left Cajon High School. And she said, this isn't bad. You should keep going. She's the one that gave me that book for my birthday. She never read it though. She saw it at Barnes & Noble, you know, you're looking around at the front tables when you walk in, and she thought, John would like this. So I gave it to her to read, and she had the same feeling. She goes, this is not that great. Why did she get the big publishing deal and it's on the front tables of Barnes & Noble? So she had the same sense that, okay, let's see what you can do. She was my biggest inspiration all through the writing of the book. Every chapter when I was done, I emailed it to her and she went over it. And this was not an easy thing, I come to realize, having your own work edited by somebody. And I had complete trust in her. And if you don't have complete trust in someone to look at what you're doing, there's going to be fights and just pouting and, you know, but that never happened. And so that's sort of the backstory to how Stories from the Classroom came to be. That's about as much of a presentation as I would like to give, because I get the sense that there are some questions either about the book or about my time at Calvary Chapel or time at Cajon or time at Golden Valley, and so I would like to open it up to any questions that you might have. Yes?
I have written so many questions for you.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it.
First of all, I am not a school teacher or an educator or anything. I do transcriptions for podcasts, mostly Manhattan Institute and Cato, which is in New York. My question to you, first of all, is you had mentioned the groups, the new classroom furniture. I'm 75. We had desks with inkwells. What do you mean by the classroom furniture? For me.
So did I.
So did you?
That was only in grade school.
Really?
Well, I'm 75 too, so.
Maybe where she went only had inkwells.
It was one room.
Catholic school.
Yeah, it's a Catholic school.
Yeah,
That's
that's
true. It's a
why.
Catholic school.
Sure, if it was good enough for those people way back when, it's good enough for you now.
Yeah, I didn't understand. You said the groups. Are they put together in a, I don't know, a long table? How do you separate those groups? So on.
That's a great question, and there probably are more things I could have done to explain that in that chapter. And that chapter was, I think, called Groups.
Yes.
Yes.
I never had a classroom where I had students walk in at the beginning of each period and sit in a group. My classes were always in rows, individual seats in rows. Now, when I wanted to do a group assignment and when I wanted them to come together in a group of 3, 4, 5, I would say, okay, we're going to do a group activity today. We practiced this yesterday. You know how to get the desks together. You know who has what responsibilities in that group. And so my classroom would, for the next 30, 35, 40 minutes, turn into a classroom that does not have rows and desks. They would physically move their desks into usually groups of 4, usually. That they're facing each other, so I had about 6 groups, 6 to 8 groups, depending on how many students were there. And they would do what's called collaborative learning. So that was back in the mid to late 90s, 2001. Today, many teachers, many schools, many classrooms have completely done away with rows. And the reason for that is because so many careers and we need our students to learn how to collaborate, and it's not just their own, you know, singular learning. We need them to discuss and to argue and to, you know, so there are many classrooms. If you go into a school today, whether it's middle school, high school, and you will see tables of 4 to 6 students, and that's every day, every class. When they walk in, they have a family. Sometimes the teachers will call, this is your family.
Cool.
And this is the new learning style. And
Cool.
whether you're in tech or medical field, this is something that every student needs to know how to do, and that's to interact with other students on a daily basis, on a regular basis, not just like I did every once in a while.
Good.
Does that help answer your question?
Definitely, thank
Okay,
you.
okay.
Yeah, yes, thank
Now,
you.
you said you had a whole list. Do you want?
Oh, I do.
Well, I don't know. You know, however we.
Well, maybe we should go.
Okay.
Yeah,
You can only go every other.
come on. That's number one. I want to say right off the bat, I love the quotes at the beginning of the chapters.
Yeah.
I am a nut for quotes. And those quotes were so good, and I've articulated that to so many of my friends. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you for sharing that, and I am glad to hear that. And I asked Lolita one day when we were having a meal. I said, "So, does every chapter need a quote? I mean, I could probably do that." She said, "No, don't force it. If you can't find one that fits, just don't put it there. Don't try and make it, you know." So thank you for sharing that. Another thing I did not put in the book is at Cajon, for the 7 years I was there, in my classroom on a whiteboard, there was a quote of the week. And so I've always been
Great.
I've always been a quote person, and whether it's, you know, something, you know, an author said, or a current event quote, or something from Plato, you know, there would always be each week a different quote in my room.
Great. Thank you.
He does that on Facebook too.
He does.
I do too much. Why am I on Facebook?
So we can keep track of it.
Well, okay.
Well, when you had that quote on the board, was there a time in the week that you brought the class's attention to that quote? And let's talk about it.
I love these questions. I love being taken back to those days, because I really do miss being a teacher. I really do. And in answer to your question, yes. The warm-ups. Sometimes, if I really felt the quote would lead into something else, I would say, okay, respond to the quote on the board. It might be Tuesday or Wednesday. What does it mean in your eyes? Is there any practical implication in your life, application in your life? And so we would spend some time talking about the quote. Not every week, but oftentimes I would do that.
Well, if
Definitely.
there was something going on in the world,
Yes.
like current event, and you had something from history, some like this is, why do you think I put this up on the board this week?
Sometimes it would be a song lyric. Sometimes it would be something one of my students wrote or said. Sometimes I'd put anonymous or unknown, even though I knew who wrote it. I would have fun with that quote sometimes. But they knew that every Monday morning when they walked in, they would see a new quote. And another thing I did when I got to Golden Valley, there was no whiteboard in my office. I didn't have a classroom, I had an office. I requested there be a whiteboard put in my office so that I could continue having quotes of the week, and I did that as a counselor.
Is the group sitting arrangement that they have now, is that a result of everybody holding up a cell phone and just not interacting?
Let me say this about cell phones. I am thankful that when I left the classroom in 2008 to go be a counselor in an office, I missed these last nearly 2 decades of teachers dealing with cell phones.
Oh, yeah.
I dealt with kids playing dice during passing periods or whatever.
Well, yeah.
Well, you know, so, but no, cell phones, oh my gosh. And so as a counselor, helping teachers figure out how to manage this whole, you know,
Technically.
right, and so I'm not really sure how to answer your question. I'm not sure if that's, I don't think it has anything to do with cell phones. I don't know how teachers do it today. It's really, because, you know, 6th graders have cell phones, 4th graders have cell phones.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. Yeah,
I am not an educator, but I worked at Ukaipa High School for 11 years. I was a lunch lady
okay, yeah.
and had a bird's eye view of students and teachers, and I loved this book because I often tried to figure out why certain teachers connected with the students. And you could tell, and Ukaipa High is a large school.
Yes.
Even back when I was there, it was pretty large.
Yeah.
You could tell the teachers that kind of commanded respect, but not only commanded respect, but earned it, and that the students connected with them. And, you know, the ones that walked through the quad and they're, hey, Mr. So-and-so, or hey, Mrs. So-and-so. And it was a real interesting part of my job as a lunch lady, just to kind of watch the kids and the teachers and the interaction, and I just thought it was great, you know.
You know what's interesting about that comment to me, you're, as a lunch aide is looking at the other teachers, teachers will look at the lunch aides, and we'll
Oh, yeah.
look at the office staff, and we'll look at the RSP teachers, and we will also, in our minds, so there's, that person is really connected to students. Because it takes a village, as you
Yeah.
know, and we're all interacting in some way with each and every student, and so, you know, it's just weird. It's true in any, I mean, there are policemen who are really people-oriented, and they're society-oriented, they're community-oriented, they're out at the fundraisers, and they're doing all these, and then there are ones that are just punching in the time clock. And it's true in any profession, I believe. In insurance, you've got people that know what they're doing, and then there are people, you know. This happens to be for the last time, over a decade. Don has been my insurance agent, and I appreciate everything he's done for me. No, seriously. So, you know, I mean, so, yeah, I agree that it's interesting just to see how people interact with students, because that's half of being at a school is interacting with students. I will joke sometimes when I walk through the office on a day where there are no students, and it's a day where just to get caught up with, it's like, God, it'd be so much easier to be a teacher without students.
Yeah.
Let's just, you know, yeah.
Well,
But
that little story about how I came to hear about this book.
oh,
Me and my wife had done a photography book for Jerry. And so we called her up and went over to her house to present her the photo book, right? And I'm looking on the wall and I see a picture on the wall signed by John Smeeby. I said, "You know him?" "Oh yeah, I know him."
and there's another Jerry that was at Cajon. Jerry, in San Bernardino, you're going to have graffiti, no matter what school you're at. It's just going to happen. And a lot of times it's not the students. It happens on the weekend. People come in, jump the fence, and someone just feels like spraying their paint. So graffiti definitely will happen, not just in San Bernardino. It'll happen in Redlands. It'll happen in Ukaipa sometimes, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So the racial, that was just a really weird thing that happened in my classroom, and I did not mean for that to happen, and I just thought it was a cool warm up, and just to think about why don't we have a Caucasian club if there are all these other clubs?
Yeah.
You know, what would happen? Would you want to join it if we did? And it really caused some lively discussions, and I really felt good at the end of the day until I came in the next day and got called to the principal's office. And,
What are you doing?
and Jared decided, and I think I used a different name, but yeah, that he should start one and was looking for an advisor. And I was like, oh no.
No.
Oh no, I don't want to be the front page of the Sun newspaper. And Mr. Simpson, the principal, made it clear to me, I've got enough issues here, Mr. Smaby. We don't need to deal with an all-white group on our campus. And he was right.
But did they actually, I mean, what would have happened had he said, look, you know, that's my right, that's my freedom of speech, my right to have a group, all these other, would it only happen if there was an advisor that would take the group?
That's one thing. So to be an official group, you have to have an advisor, and Mr. Simpson was a very excellent principal. And he went to whoever, I forget the adult that had actually agreed to be the advisor. And so he had a conversation with the student, with me, with this person that was willing to take this on. It's going to be like European history, is what they were going to call, you know, have their, that's the justification for having this Caucasian club. But I'm thankful for how they, I'm thankful for how they addressed it. They had, you know, a Hispanic vice principal come to a few of my periods that had been more than lively than the other ones, and explain, he gave a history lesson, and I really, you know, sat in the back and I listened. I was like, yeah, we do not need this at this school. We really don't. So about, you know, slavery and KKK and, you know, the civil rights movement and just, you know, so that, yeah, Mr. Simpson was okay. You know, he forgave me. I never apologized for the warm-up though, because as an English teacher, I feel like my students should be able to express and discuss and think about any and all topics. You know, To Kill a Mockingbird was a book that
Wonderful.
you know, you're right. You know, so
Wonderful book.
I didn't apologize, but I did apologize for the you know, the furor that that particular warm-up caused.
Well, you know, when we had BSU on campus, it wasn't the Black Student Union, it was called Brothers Sisters United, so that way all students could join it.
Well, and that's another thing a lot of students don't realize, that any of those groups, any races can be a part of it. Why would you, if you're an Asian student, want to be a part of the Hispanic group? You know, the Chicano, you know, that's probably not going to happen. But you are more than welcome. You know, that's part of the school rules. Yeah.
Would you say that kids are more inclined to, I hate to say this, to racism now? And my example is growing up in Newport Beach and going to high school in the 70s. I think we had one black kid, and you know, we made her the cheerleader and president of the class, and it was a reverse kind of thing where nobody wanted to appear. We had a gay straight alliance or something to that effect, and the most Catholic man, you know, on the teacher on the campus took those kids over and watched over and protected them. And this was, you know, in Newport Beach in the 70s when California wasn't so Hispanic. We're looking at a really multi-racial, really diverse population in California in the last 20 years. And it seems to me, and I don't know if it's just the news I watch or the politics that I listen to, but it seems to me like we're going back to the 70s. We're more racially divided than ever.
Agree.
And I can't
I
imagine
completely agree.
being in high school with that kind of
Completely.
hatred towards Muslims, or, you know, a lot of the stuff that's going on today. What I would do as a teacher in a high school if I was facing that kind of racism, because like I say, it was almost reverse. When I was, everybody was really trying their best, I think, to accept
There's
people of all
psychology
races.
in that. The adolescent psychology. The harder you tell a kid that they have to do this and that they mustn't do that, that's exactly what.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Let me throw out my 2 cents worth on that, and then I'm going to ask that, if possible, that we move on to other questions.
Okay, sure.
And I'll tell you why.
Good idea.
Race will be an issue that began with our country, and it will end with our country. And a friend of mine, when President Obama was elected, and by the way, I voted 2 years for George Bush before that, and
You don't need to tell us.
I voted for Gary Johnson. I voted for Gary Johnson last, and the reason is I'm now an independent moderate, and I can talk about politics with anyone, and I'm sort of glad that I found the
Good.
middle, and so it doesn't become a shouting match.
Right.
But let me share this. When President Obama was elected the first time, and one of my good friends from college said, "So do you think that racism is just gonna? Are we done with all that?" And I looked at him. I said, "Really? Are you seriously thinking that could happen? Because look at our country. This is the big experiment, and it's only 250 years old. China, India, Mexico, Africa. Let me just say this: if I were to go over to China or to Africa or to Mexico and run for president, even if that was allowed, would I get elected? Absolutely not.
Nope.
Absolutely not. It does happen in our country because this is an experiment, And what the experiment means is that that can happen. It also means there's going to be a lot of changes, a lot of friction, and we've seen it before, we're seeing it now, and we will continue to see it, but I believe it's an experiment that is worthwhile. And so that's how I'd like to, and we could just spend the rest of this evening talking about race if you'd like.
Yeah, no,
But I'm glad that you brought that up, because it is a huge part of education today, especially in America.
Yeah, I would think just neutrality is a big part of education. Just remaining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you want to move on, John, but I feel compelled to just reassure
Sure.
Terry, because I love you, and I just recently retired from teaching high school. Racism is not in the high school at the high school level. It's the older folks.
Yes.
It's not the kids, and I can tell you because I taught at two very racially diverse high schools, and I am the mother of biracial children, and I can tell you right now, especially in the last decade that I taught, I never had to have conversations anymore with my high school students about how to behave around people who were diverse from them. We had wonderfully mixed classes of, I had black kids and Mexican kids and white kids and girls in hijabs in my classrooms, and we did collaborative learning, and the kids never, and I had gay kids and trans kids, and the kids never stopped to say, I don't want to work with that person. It was never, ever an issue. I did, however, have to sometimes take my colleagues aside, who were my age, and have a conversation with them. But never
Good
with
to
the
know.
students.
So, like he's saying, it's coming from the top. It's coming from the parents
Oh,
down.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that we
When
came.
I was going to school back
Right.
in the late 40s, I guess I was only born in the mid-40s. I had Japanese friends, I had black friends, I had
Yeah.
Hispanic friends. We were all like 5, 6,
too.
8 years old, 10 years old. My sister was older, so yeah. My dad was the biggest racist on the planet, and I hated it.
Yep. I was just gonna say we
So-
came from a generation that taught us to be racist.
Well, no,
I had to unlearn it when I was in high school, and I think that's true of a lot of people my age. But as far as the kids who are kids now, they don't stop to look at. They don't define kids by the color of their skin anymore, or what religion
Well, that's
they
pretty
are,
hopeful.
or
That is
Yeah.
very,
Yeah, that's great.
very,
Kids
very
are absolutely
good.
wonderful.
That's great.
And I agree with you because I have, all of my grandkids now are teen.
Yep.
And we have conversations. They don't see race, they don't see
race.
any of that stuff. They're like, oh, no, that's not,
Yep.
I
It
taught
makes me
hair.
so
Yeah.
hopeful for what
yeah.
future generations will
Right.
be
Yeah.
in this country. We just have to get past the baby
Yeah.
boomer, sorry y'all, but
I've taught high school, relatively recently too. And I have had absolutely, and I taught at Pacific High School for a number of years, for 12 years, and then I taught at Whitney High School in Cerritos for 12 years. So and at Whitney it was all, they had to, be completely stellar or they couldn't get in. It was a public academic magnet. But in that school and at Pacific High School, I never experienced issues in my classroom. At Pacific, during the 90s, there would be issues on campus, but not in the classroom. It's like they knew that was not okay in the classroom. But on campus, we'd have, we had a lot of kids who were from Samoa, and we would have those guys against black guys. But in the classroom, I would never see it. And at Whitney, I started there in 2001, and it was never there. And it was very racially diverse. It was Koreans and Japanese and Chinese, and they, traditionally don't get along. And the only racism I ever saw was from parents. And I have to say the Indian parents were the worst.
Which Indians?
Pakistani
Pakistan.
and they were
One
the
from India.
worst. Huh? India, Indians.
Yes.
And
Not
why?
the Native
Why?
Americans.
Because they come, that's their way where they live, I
Well,
guess.
they live with castes.
Yeah, and
Oh,
they
caste
come
system.
here and
Yes,
they
that's right.
immediately label.
Yeah.
Black teachers had a hell of a time because the Indian parents would come in and just, you know, were totally anti.
I'm actually
But-
glad
Anyway.
that you said what you did about the students in your classes, and you experienced the same thing, and that's a big part of, it has been being a teacher. It's not just the curriculum, it's getting along. It's social skills, it's the history of who we are, so, no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to direct the conversation in that.
No, yeah.
So I was just curious what your experience
The-
was with it.
And even, you know, more so to that, I was wondering if anyone would notice throughout just little bits and pieces of my upbringing, of being exposed to the tennis player I played with in high school, and the school I went to for 6th grade that I was forcefully bused. You know, as opposed to my parents saying, "Oh no, that's not going to happen. We're sending you to private school." The white flight thing. That throughout my life, it's almost been like these little things that have come up that have exposed me to these other cultures. I was raised in the southern part of Pasadena near Caltech and Huntington Library, in the nice parts, and I was so glad my parents. On our street, it was divided. Half of it was Pasadena, half of it was San Marino. I came like 5 houses away from going to San Marino High School, which is almost like a big private school. I don't know if you know anything about San Marino.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was very fortunate to have been, you know, to have experienced these other cultures in small ways. But they, at this point, I look back and I'm like, yeah, that helped me teach in a public school in San Bernardino. It really did. Just, you know, being exposed to,
Yeah.
yeah.
But my dad, like yours, was a genteel, sophisticated Archie Bunker.
All I know
An
is if
oxymoron.
you weren't white, he didn't like you.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. But
And,
he did it.
and even
you know,
if you were
nicely.
white, because Germans were Krauts and
Right.
And Italians were Dagos, and yeah, they had,
it's
yeah.
like it didn't matter if you were white.
Absolutely.
If you weren't born here,
Yep.
But
yeah,
that's so funny because we're a nation of immigrants. It's just so funny to me.
Well,
That's-
that's what gets me about what's going on with
Except
building a
Muslims.
stupid wall.
Well, we really
sounds-
should.
Yeah,
You know what?
That's what I was waiting for.
No, we don't go there.
All right. Let me dovetail, if I can, from
Let's move on from
racist
that.
There we
to
go.
violence. And this was not something that I put in the book. But when I became a counselor at Golden Valley, it was part of my job description to talk to students about violence, and it, you know, Columbine, I think, happened in, correct me if I'm wrong, 99?
90 something.
Late
I don't think it was
90s.
99.
It
I
was
think
99.
Yeah, I think
Was
it was
it?
late 90s. And so I became a counselor in 2001. And so we had, you know, 9/11, but then all these school shootings started to happen. And I would give presentations to my students at Golden Valley as a counselor, and we would talk about school violence, about their role in protecting their school, and if you hear of anything, you really want to let someone know, an adult. And we would have discussions much like this with my 7th and 8th graders, and I would ask them sometimes as the warm-up. I would go in, I wasn't their teacher, I was the counselor visiting their room that day, and the warm-up would say something like this: do you think that Golden Valley could be a school where one of these shootings might take place? Is it possible to have that happen here at Golden Valley in San Bernardino? Why or why not? And they would write for a few minutes, and would anyone like to share? And I said, and I would say, do you want to know what Mr. Smapey thinks? Do you even care about my opinion on that? And so a couple students might raise their hand, and I would say, well, here's what I think. In San Bernardino, now, and we did have the shooting at that county office about 3 years ago. Wasn't it a school? I said, I really would be surprised And here's why. In San Bernardino, cities like San Bernardino and Detroit, and you run through the list, the violence happens usually on the weekends and at night on the streets.
It does, yeah.
And when students come to class, it is a break. It is their vacation from their neighborhoods many times. Now in Columbine, in that upper middle class, mostly Caucasian world, it's a different story. And many of these school shootings have happened and are happening, and I'm not even going to include the one on North Park where the guy from Riverside came and it was a family dispute. It wasn't even anything. So unfortunately, San Bernardino has a lot of violence, but it usually happens in the streets at night on the weekends. Kids will usually not bring that to our schools.
Oh, back in the 60s when I went to Pacific High School, and there was a lot of problems going on after school, but school was a neutral zone.
Yes.
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 And everything was great. We didn't even have problems at the football games.
Right.
Because it was all neutral. But it was, and plus they didn't have the guns back then when they, and I'm not an anti-gun person. But it's just the idea that mentality then was different than what it is now. And you felt safe on your campus. Now, I've been at Cajon when we had a couple of riots. It was an interesting experience. And, but it wasn't, the rioting was caused by other things.
Right.
Yes. Yes. I made reference in one of the chapters about
We
a
need more
student
wine.
who was afraid that there was someone after school in the campus down the street that was after him who was armed, and he was looking for guns called weapons. And so, he didn't find the gun during the school day.
Kids aren't, they usually have a big sign across their forehead saying, "I hate everybody around me." Yeah.
I don't know if it was a quote at the beginning of one of the chapters, but there was always this saying that I remembered all through my 23 years in education, and it was that there are two types of students. There were students that would come to school to learn because their home life was stable, because both parents were there to tell them this is why you go to school. And then there are students that come to school to find love because they were not finding it at home. And they would bring to school with them that lack of love without even realizing what they were doing was they were acting out in order to find someone that would notice, that would listen, that would put their arms around you, that would take the time to help them.
Yeah.
Two types of students.
Which segues into the question that I was going to ask. You don't mention whether you were married during this time, whether you had, there was a special someone, so we don't know, are you a married teacher? But we know that you're younger in the book. You're on the younger scale, and you're male.
Yeah.
So, I remember my relationship with the male teachers in high school. I was in love with my English teacher. Seriously. He was just so poetic and so romantic. And, Mr. Glennon, he was young. And did you find that girl, you had that, back then you could probably give a kid a hug. There wasn't that how many second rule that you're allowed. Did you find that, and you alluded to it in one of your chapters.
Right, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yes.
But was that like an ongoing thing, being a younger male teacher?
It was not, and let me flip the script a little bit, and I can show you why I don't see this an issue. For all the young female teachers that are taking a 10th grade boy to Vegas with them.
Yeah, well, that.
Okay, so this has become more and more of a thing. And it does stem from problems at home for the adults. The marriages that are falling apart at home with these 30-year-old, 35-year-olds.
Well, I'm not saying Mr. Glennon never did anything, but we were all in love with him. I wasn't the only one. It was just a girl thing.
Okay,
And I had a perfectly wonderful father.
Okay. No, I guess my point is whether you're a female or a male, whether you're older or younger, whether you're married or single, you know, just as race and violence is going to be a part of a teaching experience, so will sexual and relationships become part of that too. You know, hugging a student, that's not allowed. But if you're an elementary school teacher, especially, come on, right?
Not allowed.
But beneath them. And that's what this program continues to do. And there are other offshoots, things like Gear Up that's been happening that have been doing amazing things for students. But in order to become part of the AVID program, you have to apply, you have to write a letter, you have to get teacher referrals, you have to, you know, go through this interview process because it's highly selective. And we're not just gonna let anyone in. If you are someone whose both parents went to college and you get good grades, you don't need the extra support is sort of the mentality behind that program. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
We always had to take, I think, one AP class, right? The AVID kids usually.
You know, when I was teaching high school, I wasn't really familiar with it. It might not even been around when I started teaching high school, but as a middle school counselor, I never was the high school counselor, so I'm not sure about that, but you're probably right.
Well, I was there when it started,
Okay.
kind of midway through my time at Pacific.
Yep.
And it was definitely, you know, to you know, take kids to college campuses and teach
Yep.
them how to make the application and how to write the letters and all that.
What about the kids that don't really want to go to college? They want a career, a technical engineering, a CTE.
They're discouraged.
Thank you for
In
that
San
question.
Bernardino, they're
And
discouraged.
like the topic of race, honestly, and I'm all for it. We could spend the rest of the evening talking about the discrepancy in how we teach children. That there's the ones that go to college and the ones that aren't going to go to college, and we all know this is, you know, who has a mechanic? They didn't go to college. Who has, you know, any number of these trades, and they will either, you know, start working when they graduate, or, you know, and then later go to trade school or whatever. And yet our school systems just feel like we need to cram everyone into college.
Why? Why
At
is
least in
that?
San Bernardino,
Why
I remember
is that?
you didn't
I don't
even
know.
talk about
I don't know.
kids that didn't want to go to college. It was, you know, the AP kids are obviously going to college. The
discriminated.
AVID kids that were going to college, and the other kids that were being pushed. You know, and
they
every
couldn't
teacher
fit.
knew that they were being pushed, and the kids knew they were being pushed, and the parents disagreed with but at least in San Bernardino, there was not a child that was not college bound.
Right.
All
Oh.
students were college bound.
Really?
Is that
No,
still true?
I don't know, but I think
No.
that was
It's true.
disgraceful.
It's
I think that's
disgraceful.
awful.
I didn't. That's one thing I didn't
It's
agree with
frustrating.
that.
So
school
there's no
district.
vocational training that they're
No.
There used to be,
Zero.
but they took it
yeah,
out.
they took that
Oh
all.
They
my
even had,
gosh.
like,
Well, they had
the home ec classes, the
Right.
kids
Yeah.
learned how to cook, they learned
Yeah.
how to do different
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Learn
Auto
how
shop.
to be
They should have changed the name
self-sufficient.
from home ec to brunch.
But,
And then kids
Life.
would have been all.
Life.
but see, at
The kids didn't have a choice.
No.
Brunch 101.
You
They were
know,
given a choice.
let me
How to
do
make
a-
friends.
A quick
That was just
timeout,
stuff.
It's
because I
very
did follow many of my students that were with me the past 14 years at Golden Valley Middle School when they went to Cajon and San Bernardino. And there is auto shop at Cajon.
Right.
Yeah, there is
That's unusual.
ROTC for students that want to join the military. So the district is attempting, it is trying to accommodate all students, knowing that they're not all going to go to college, but the attempt is not where it should be. It's
Yeah.
not
I
nowhere
know-
near where it should be.
when I worked with the kids at Cajon especially, I found out about the Explore programs, within the city, and those who want to go in the medical field, I had them become explorers, and they went to AMR. And at AMR, it's all volunteering time. And AMR was so impressed with the kids, they would pay for their classes at Crafton for a paramedic. I had a student at, I wish I could remember his name, he was Asian, and he was going to the AMR to volunteer, and then, because he wanted to become a doctor. And then when he was doing his, call-outs, he would ask the doctors, what school do you recommend me to go to? But they were getting that experience from, say, the volunteering and receiving the credit for it. At the time when I was at Cajon, we did shadowing programs where kids could shadow careers of their choice. I had a student that wanted to become a coroner. So,
How interesting.
Yeah.
you know, and she's now, she lives in Northern California and she's a mortician.
Yeah.
But it's all from the experience. I had a kid who was in a wheelchair who wanted to become a policeman. Well, I spent 11 years in law enforcement. And I said, you know what you could do? You could be a fantastic dispatcher.
Right.
And then he gets his hands into the career field. But it's up to to me, like teachers like John and
Right.
teachers who take the time to listen to the kids, because they're walking encyclopedias. I learned as much from them as I prayed that I was getting to reach them with.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Because they're magnificent. There are the ones that you think, how did you get this far?
Why did your parents not drown you?
Well, I thought that when I was raised, my son hit his teens, and I realized there was a lot of adults walking around, so there was hope.
Yeah.
But when John mentioned about
The
two types of students, I had three. The kids I dealt with, there were the raised, the jerked up, and the throwaways. And the throwaways were the kids that were on their own.
Yes. I
Like
know
Charles.
A lot of those
Like
kids.
Charles.
So many of them.
And and the jerked up is just like what those kids went through. But you could tell the difference of the ones who were raised.
Oh, yes.
But it's sad. I would say the majority of kids that came, I was a career technician, and that came in there, all they wanted was to know that they could maybe do something with their lives. And then of course I had kids that they were starving to find out information. But it was the ones that were the jerked up and the throwaways that brought me, made your heart feel good when they graduated. Because they always would ask me, and I'm sure they've asked John, how many kids are going to graduate this year? Or how many do you want to graduate this year? I always said to any of my kids, and I called all the kids on campus my kids. If I could get one to graduate, I'm happy. And everything after that one is an extra gift. But the kids are, that's why I enjoyed working with John, because he had such fantastic rapport with the kids. Like that part in the book with when the two kids were killed in that automobile accident.
Oh, my tennis players.
Oh,
Yeah.
that day
Yeah.
was unbelievable.
That week, that year.
Yeah, the whole time. But I mean, the initial shock and everything, and you realize what an impact these high school kids, how it affects you.
Yes.
And when I read that, I cried my eyes out, because I remember when it all happened. And what was hard is there you're dealing with your own emotions. We had grief groups going on, and then you had the kids who didn't know what happened. And they would come in and they're selves, so you had to switch your emotions and everything else to take care of their needs. Because a lot of people fail to realize we're all human, and we all have feelings. But when you're going through a tragedy, we lost those kids, and then another year, 2 kids after baccalaureate on Sunday night before graduation. They were sitting on a curb in front of their own house, and gangbangers came by and shot them.
Oh,
I mean, every year we just were praying that we could get through the year without losing anybody. Because it affected our campus so much.
Yeah.
But I tell you, but having teachers like John were an absolute blessing.
Jerry, I'm glad you brought that up, because I remember having a conversation with a young girl after Tommy and Leilani were killed in that auto crash, and people saw all the outpouring of love and support. These were 2 IB students. Tommy was running for student body president. They were varsity tennis players. And this young girl after school was in my class. I mean, I know you're really bummed out about your students. Do you remember 2 months ago, that was my brother who was shot, and no, there was nothing like what's going on here, for him. And what, yeah, she was struggling, and I like, wow, you know what? You're right. And I really didn't have a good answer for her. But if there's a celebrity that dies, everyone just stops everything. This is the way life works. I mean, a hard way for her to learn that lesson.
So her brother wasn't an IB student?
No, he was not. He wasn't a varsity tennis player. He wasn't running for student body president. He was not popular.
So
right.
It was a life.
He wasn't everybody's
Yes.
Yeah.
But right. It was her brother, and so she was just trying to come to grips with why is there this discrepancy in how the school is. I mean, we made a big deal of it. There's a big memorial service in the gym for those two students. I remember from some of the administrators and some of the counselors, the crisis team, we don't want to set a precedent here. Be careful about what you do and the memorials that you leave behind. And looking back on that, that was wise. That was wise.
But peer leadership used to help out quite a bit with the kids when they had a loss in the family or friends got killed.
Yes.
Well, but it becomes really difficult in the wake of, like you say, celebrity suicides, where there's a marked 10% increase in suicides when a celebrity commits suicide, and overall suicides are up 30%. Well, for years you never heard anything about suicide. They didn't talk about it. And then with Michael Bourdain and Kate Spade and people like that, it started to come up. And kids who are hopeless, I don't know, are they getting...
Suicide, that's another issue we could talk about all night.
I know.
Well, no, but that's why I'm here. And I'm glad we're dealing with these issues, because as a counselor, that's a chapter that would be in the next book. And as you know, I think I shared in the book that I did not write a book about 14 years in the counseling office, because that's very confidential, and even if I change names. But the biggest issue ever in those 14 years was a suicidal boy that attempted suicide. Thankfully, he was not successful in his attempt. But I'll never forget when he was sitting on my couch, because a friend of his had brought a letter to me that he had written to her, an ex-girlfriend, explaining why he had attempted to take his life. And I talked to him about it. And then I made a call to his stepdad, and here's what the stepdad told me. And he's sitting on the couch in my office when I'm making this call, and stepdad's talking to me when I told him that your son attempted suicide. He said, that kid, I don't know what I'm going to do with him. A couple weeks ago I caught him with weed, and so here's his situation. He's living with a stepdad. His mom, who the stepdad had one time married, had taken off. She just couldn't handle life anymore, and she was running in Vegas with somebody, just had left. And so here now we have this stepdad with this son, 8th grade boy. It became very clear right at that moment when I was talking to stepdad, okay, and his real dad was in prison. So real dad's in prison, mom's on the run in Vegas, and this stepdad that's wondering, I didn't sign up for this.
Right.
I didn't sign up for an 8th grader to be on weed and attempting suicide. And I'm like, sir, are you his legal guardian? Yes, I am, but okay. In this moment in time, you need to work with me here. You have an 8th grader that just attempted to kill himself, and we're going to need to get him into counseling. And that was not easy. I had to call CPS, because the following week when I followed up with the boy, there had not been any counseling appointments set. I later saw him skateboarding down Highland Avenue, and so that was like the summer after he left middle school before high school, and I just have to hope, and we always send referrals to the high school where our problem kids are going, to make sure they know who they're receiving, who they're getting, and what their issues are. So I'm hoping that he found a counselor that understood what the situation was and would be able to help. But yeah, suicide, that's
That's a tough one in the high school, yeah.
At,
We had a-
yeah, middle school even, yeah.
Well, does anyone else have any questions about the book,
book,
or
yeah.
is there?
Well, this is all part, is in the
No,
book.
it's
but-
it's all part of
okay.
the book, but
But sure.
anything
Yeah,
specifically
okay.
about the author's writing
Alright,
style,
okay.
or
I want to talk about the leniency in schools. Why is it so lenient now? Why are
Because of the
teachers
parents.
frightened to report these children that have beat the bejeebus out of the teacher or thrown something? What has happened to our school system?
The parents.
oh boy, there's a whole other.
Anybody?
Hi, come on, guys.
I believe it's because of the administration and the district office.
I do too.
And that's my opinion.
Why?
Because they
Right.
don't want problems.
They don't want to be in
They don't want to be in
So
court.
they
Well,
won't-
teachers
won't
are
back you
afraid
up?
to even
They won't back
say
you up?
something.
No, they don't back, excuse me, John.
That's all right.
Sorry.
John's nicer than I am. They do not support the staff. They do not support discipline. I worked with a principal at Pacific who came over. He was fantastic. He was pro-staff. They got rid of him.
Of course.
Big and discipline. I give you. I knew I retired because I knew my days were numbered. A kid came into the career center at Pacific, and he, they're on the computer, and he wasn't doing his work. So I checked because I had access to check the computer. Saw that he was definitely not on an educational website. So I shut it down, and he knew I did it. And it was a black kid. He goes, "You know what? You're nothing but a fucking bitch." And I looked at him. I said, "You better clarify that." And he goes, "By what?" I said, "I'm a fucking white bitch." He goes, "I'm going to call my mama." I said, "Here's the phone." And it was. I retired in 2008 at the end of the first semester. But that probably happened in 2007.
How awful for your teachers, for you as teachers,
Well,
to have to put up with
well,
this.
I wasn't a teacher. I was classified.
You know,
Nobody
the
really
thing-
has to put up with that though.
And I never, ever,
I know.
in all my years at Pacific, I was called a honky once. Once in 12 years. But it's like John said, is you treat them with respect. You treat their needs with respect. They treat you with respect. And they protect you. You know, I mean, I never
Okay.
had any problems because I had, Willie Tenner, who would kill anybody that gave me any trouble. I mean, it was just like that. He was on the football team. He was a great big guy, and I worked with him and treated him with respect. He came after school one day and he said, "Miss Palmieri, I saw you last night walk into your car from your classroom." He said, "I don't want to ever see you do that again." He said that was a very dangerous thing to do, and he said, "And I won't always be there."
Oh, God love
So who knows what happened?
Oh, my God.
But I mean, but I mean,
Protective.
they are.
They're
If
fiercely loved.
yeah. And my husband was a counselor at Carson High School, or the LA School District, and the Samoans protected him from any,
Whoa.
because he was, good to them, and he wasn't better to them than he was to anybody else, but because he treated them with respect, and there are issues with respect.
That is the word, respect. And there were three things I think I highlighted in the chapter that was called management.
Yes.
And every teacher is taught that you need to learn how to manage your classroom. And what that means, what I learned that meant was, you don't want to have to be calling parents all the time or the front office all the time when you have a problem. You need to manage things as much as possible within your own classroom with the means that you have been given. And respect was one of the things, seating charts was one of the things, and I'm spacing out, maybe you can help me on the third thing. It was seating charts, it was respect would be the top of those three things. It, for me,
Lesson planning.
thank you, with
Oh,
lesson
lesson
plans.
plans.
If you're just, yeah, if
You've got a
you're,
lot of tabbed pages.
I love it. Yeah, I see those. Yeah, so that's almost as long as your list. Those tabs.
When you see she's the wind beneath her
quotes.
wings.
All right.
Yeah.
So yeah, if lesson plannings, if you're one of those teachers, the college professors that's at middle school, and you're given a 50-minute lesson, you know, you're going to have some problems towards the end of that 50-minute session if you're just giving a lecture. You don't do that. You can't do that. That's another reason why I would start using collaborative learning. Get them in groups. You know, let them talk with each other and learn from each other, and then at the end we'll come back and debrief. But respect. And that is from the time this earth was created to the time it disappears, not just in education, but in the home, in the communities, in the classrooms, in the corporations.
On Facebook.
That, listen, well, that's a problem right there. When we get behind that screen, and no one can see us, no, yeah, so we're losing it on, right, exactly. But no, seriously, in this room, that is the one thing when you become a teacher that I would tell anyone. If you cannot master that, you're going to be in trouble.
Yep.
And yet there are so many teachers, because I was a special education tutor, so I was in many classrooms in different grade levels, 6, 7, and 8. Many different teaching styles. Many of the young, brand new teachers wanted to be their friend. And you can well imagine how that always worked out.
There's a fine line.
There is.
There can be a fine line, and I
Can't
crossed it
be their friend.
many times. And I realized it when I crossed it. I was like, oh, no, that was not fair. You have to treat all students fair. Well, that's a nice, lofty goal,
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
you know, you're not always going to hit it straight on.
Yeah.
I think Jean has a question.
Having sat through many a boring English classes, I so enjoyed reading how you structured your class. Kept it interesting. I wished I'd been in one.
And you know, I really appreciate hearing that from the book. It's like when you watch a reality program on TV, like Cops, or you know, and you're seeing a little glimpse, or the Kardashian family, or what. You don't watch that whole thing. Housewives, okay. And you're seeing a little glimpse, and so I'm sharing a little glimpse of what I try to do every day. Unfortunately, it didn't always work out like I hoped it would every day, and there were plenty of days in my classroom that it was boring. But my goal was to entertain, as I in the opening, that was my word: respect and entertain, meaning hold their attention as much as I could. If you're trying to do lectures, you need to be in college. You need to be at a JC or at a master's program, and that's what they're there for. They need to hear from you. But if you're in middle school or high school, you're not going to be able to sit through 55 minutes of someone talking.
I tried to make sure I made them laugh once a day.
Yes, I love that. I love that.
Good.
I mean, once a period.
And I was able to do things like put out a warm-up for the first 5 minutes, and that they had to write about it for 5 minutes, and then, okay, he wants to share, and then we'd move on to Romeo and Juliet. But on certain days, like Caucasian Club, I would let them go if they really wanted to talk about an issue that had been raised either by me or someone else, and I felt like it was respectful and it was somewhat within the realm of curriculum that we needed to go over. I would let them take the whole period if they showed that they were interested in that. Couldn't do that anymore if I was a teacher today.
Well, you know, I'm so glad that I got out. But, well, I didn't really get out before it, but because we were at Whitney High School and we had, you know, like scores through the roof on our AP exams, the district office left us alone.
Right, yeah.
Thank God.
Yes.
But that whole thing that they were doing to all the other grades, what's it called? Common Core.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
my.
Oh, no.
It was awful. And this notion that everybody in the school had to be lockstep in the same, but we didn't teach the same books. We didn't, you know, everybody, at least at Whitney, we let teachers teach the books they were passionate about. So, because we felt like, well, that would make the student passionate, but it's just horrible.
I have another question too, as we're getting towards 8 o'clock and wrapping up. If Betsy DeVos was Jennifer Underwood right there, that's not Jennifer, that's Betsy DeVos. What would you say to her? What does education need today? I mean, how are we going to turn this thing around? And of course, you're the author. So.
And you made a very good distinction there. You said, of course, I'm the author, and that's all I am. And all of you, half of you have been in education in some way, and the rest of you vote people into it, into leadership positions. So I tried to make it clear in the book that even as an educator, I do not have the answers. But here's my answer about Betsy. Recently, last week or so, our president has made it clear that he is very interested in merging the Department of Labor with the Department of Education.
What?
And in so doing, basically he's trying to dissolve, and as Republicans do, we don't want a lot of big government, it's too expensive, we don't need it, and I'm actually going to agree with getting rid of the federal Department of Education. Here's why.
Oh, yeah.
Here's why. Because as a teacher, you know that you know your students. You know the 40 or 35 students you have in your classroom. The bell rings, you close your door, you do your thing. You have curriculum, you might expose them to some of it, but not all of it, because some woman in Washington, D.C., is she really going to understand or know or have the time to deal with what's going on behind your door when
Hell
that
no.
bell rings?
No.
Absolutely
No.
not. Is
No.
even from a state level,
No.
even from an individual, and I'm a big supporter of states' rights. Texas, keep your guns. Utah, keep your, Mormon people. So, no, seriously, California is obviously a left-leaning state.
California.
So if you don't like the state you're in, go find some state.
right.
We've got 50 of them.
Yeah, it's funny.
So listen. So education should be molded from the state, from the county, from the district, from the
Agreed.
school, from the teacher. Not from DC, that's ridiculous. And I know there's money from that, but just spread it out to the state somehow. We do not need a federal Department of Education. Okay, I'm
No,
done.
I agree.
Okay. Very interesting. And other teachers in the group, what would you say to that?
Absolutely
Wasn't a
not.
teacher.
That we do not need anybody in the government, Washington D.C., telling us how to run classrooms.
Even at state.
I will
Not
go.
even in the state,
Not even the
Sacramento.
state.
No
I don't even
way.
think there should be county administrators or city administrators at the district office telling the teachers and the classified employees what to do on campus when they won't even step a foot on the campus to know what you're
That's
going
so
through.
And there's
how
another
to-
thing in San
However-
Bernardino County, you've got Lake Arrowhead, you've got Loma Linda, you've got San Bernardino, you've got Yucaipa.
You got-
They are four completely different communities,
Where are
completely.
they?
And the upper desert.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And but you think about it, like with our community here, it's Calamasa, Yucaipa's San Bernardino County, Calamasa's Riverside County. And that's a screwed up situation
Right.
there.
Well, so it comes down to the school
That's
and
right.
the classroom and
Right.
even the team, if you're on a team of 4 teachers.
Right.
Those are the people that know what to do with those students.
I do think
Right.
they
Yeah.
needed some
What
uniformity
is that, a pyramid?
in what the expectations were for graduating from high school.
Oh, yeah.
For 8th grade, because we were kind of all over the place when I first got into the business. And kids were coming out with all different kinds of education. So we did need a little uniformity,
Well,
but not to
Point
the
well
extent.
taken, but we also have that going from state to state when we have to become a lawyer or in medicine or even in driver's licenses. I'm not sure, so there's a lot when you transfer it over to a different state.
True.
And with education, I believe it's okay to be a little bit off from what the other 49 or what their requirements are. I think it's okay, even district to district even. But your point is very well taken. We do need certain things that are standard in our country,
But not how to do it. Not
But
how
yeah,
to
not-
get it.
Oh, yeah.
But not
There's
how
a
to get it.
difference
Yeah.
between uniformity and coherence. We don't need uniformity, but we need
coherence and at least an understanding. Okay, right, yes.
What I
yes.
didn't like
Now,
is when
now, are
they had-
you a teacher? And are you a teacher? And are you a teacher? No, you're just friends. You just came to support your friend.
yes.
Oh, that's lovely.
Well,
And you?
I-
And you? Did you come to? Are you
This
a
is- this-
teacher?
This is a great story.
I have taught, but I have not taught kids, thank God.
We go back 30 years.
The radio chapter.
Oh my God.
Ah, okay, all right.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Both hands.
The closest I went back to radio was the Fusion Art book, which I'm gonna leave for you. So this was, you know, this was my sort of like looking back on those years, which meant a lot to me and prepared me for education, interestingly enough, but.
Zach, I was really tickled when I read that part that you were a DJ. And I thought, what an opportunity. Because you have this fantastic speaking voice, but you could be a whole completely different personality because you just have a mic in front of you. You're not seeing.
I'll wake up in a minute.
That was an amazing time, yeah, being on the radio. And people,
It had to be.
they tended to look at me like a celebrity, and I'm like, boy, this is my job.
Yeah.
It's what I do. You do something different, you know, it makes me, yeah.
John, through your experience with education, but prior to education, do you believe your life experience, like with being a DJ and doing, say, any type of community service or whatever, through your growing years and then college, being the DJ, then going into education, do you believe at the time you were getting life experience before the career in education, that benefits you other than going from high school to college into the classroom?
How much can you get on your knee there?
That's a great question. I'm really glad I
Oh my
waited a
goodness.
decade and didn't start education until, thank you, my mid-30s. Because actually it wasn't so much radio, it was working with a youth group at Calvary Chapel Redlands, my church. And being a part of that youth group every week and giving messages, standing up on a Sunday morning or a Tuesday night and giving you know, a Bible study. That really was one of the things that, and there's a chapter in there, it's called, I don't know, preaching or something, I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, that definitely. People need to bring into the classroom experiences like that. I mean, you could probably get away with just, you know, high school and get your college degree and credential and then start teaching. I would not have wanted to do that. I would have ended
I
up
was
way
one of the
different.
throwaway kids. I transferred from Chicago to California to Nevada. 9th grade, I walked up to my teacher and I told him, my English teacher, I said, I don't know how to diagram sentences. He said, if you don't know now, you'll never know.
That was his answer.
Yeah, that's what he told me.
Here's
So I just went and sat down and cried because
right.
toss away.
That would have
And now
been my-
she's written a trilogy.
Yes.
Wow, I love it.
She's an author.
I love it. Well, sure. No, that would have been
And I
my
can
thought.
diagram sentence diagram if I want to, but I don't.
Right. That might have been my thought, but I would not have voiced it like that to a student. I never learned grammar. Maybe when I was in high school, my teachers tried to teach me, and I just spaced out during that lesson. I never really learned the structure and what it's called to have certain things happen in a sentence. And so you can't teach something you don't know.
In high school, you learned that in grade school.
Well, so like I said, I either, you know,
You missed that day.
I really did. No, I never
that me?
really got, and so, you know the difference between whole reading and, so I was like a whole reader. I would just read and learn. I would learn from the, you know, the story. I would not learn about the how the sentence was structured. So that's how I taught. And I was just hoping that there would be other teachers that they would have. I knew that I was only one of 4 high school teachers and that someone else would teach them, you know, the other stuff. But no, yeah, that's not a good thing for a teacher to tell a student ever.
But I think I would have told you the same in a different way because I think diagramming sentences is
It's fun.
Ridiculous.
stupid.
Oh, no, it's fun.
Well, I mean, if you enjoy that sort of thing.
Such a nerd.
I wanted
She's a computer nerd.
You never did learn it, did you?
I had a
know how to
teacher
do
who
it.
spent a whole,
I don't see the point in it, but yeah.
I had a teacher
I taught
who spent a
myself.
whole damn year diagramming sentences, and I never wanted to do English again ever.
I just want to thank the author for being here.